Munster defended with everything they had to come through against 14-man Glasgow. My name's Mark, let's talk rugby. We had a frenetic start to the game, both teams playing at pace and looking to keep the ball alive, and it didn't really die down for most of the game. Really intense game here, proper knockout rugby. We've seen a lot of really competitive games this weekend. First chance goes to Glasgow, to Pelatu. He breaks the line, targeting Peter O'Mahony, who was favouring his shoulder. He gets up to the 22. They got a 3-on-2, but Dempsey can't hold on to his offload. Peter O'Mahony then has to go off injured about a minute later. Hodnett comes on for him. Munster finding it hard to get out of their own half early on. Glasgow applying great pressure in defence and coming forward in attack. Glasgow then win a penalty for Frisch not releasing. They kick that to the corner. It's a really great kick from halfway to get them very close. Go to the maul. Munster managed to hold them out, almost drive them into touch. Then they go to one-out runners, win a penalty advantage for Archer being offside. We come back for the penalty in front of the post. Glasgow decide that they're going to go back to the corner. They spread it from the line out. Munster again holding them out. Dempsey with a good carry. Munster offside. Get a warning from the ref. Glasgow then decide to go back to the original corner that they kicked into. They set up the maul and it's going forward, but Munster managed to get in amongst them and make it unplayable. Turnover scrum to them. And yeah, it's very physical from both teams and just maintaining that intensity. Glasgow then, they come back again. They're camped on the Munster line. They drive over, but Munster get under Jack Dempsey and manage to hold them up. Munster then finally have their first period of sustained possession in the Glasgow half. They work it to within 5 metres of the line. The ball goes loose and Matthews almost gets there to turn it over for Glasgow, but Munster retain it. They now work their way up to the shadows of the post. Coombs is stopped just short of the line. Finally, Fekitoa goes over when they go out to the backs. Crowley converts this one 7-0 Munster lead. Munster then lose Snyman to a failed HIA. They break up the left wing with Murray. Tom Jordan comes across a tackle. Both players end up down injured. We have a TMO check for head-on-head contact. Jordan, when he comes over, it's an upright tackle. There's no real attempt to wrap. It's direct head contact, high level of danger. Referee says there's no mitigation. It's a red card. So he's off, and Murray doesn't return from his HIA either. Glasgow down to 14 for the rest of the game. Munster then go to the corner from the penalty. Matt Ferguson gets pinged for in at the side of the maul. Munster decide to go back into the corner. From there, then they go to one-out runners, get another penalty advantage, but they don't need it because Frisch gets over to score. Some really good hands from Daly and Crowley in the build-up to that try. It's converted and it's 14-0 to Munster. Munster then get themselves a 5-metre scrum after Ollie Smith juggles a kick through from Nash and ends up grounding it over his own line. Nice kick and then good pressure from Nash, but Smith probably should have done better with that one. Munster pick and drive at the line with Coombs, Wycherley and a few others stopped just short. We then have a team row review as Archer seems to be short. Glasgow thought that they'd held them up over the line. It ends up being a 5-metre scrum to Munster. Some great defence from Glasgow then, driving them back into tackle. Munster decide to go wide, but there's a forward pass from Nash. Some really good defence from Glasgow, Darge and Dempsey to the fore there. Munster then come again. Glasgow able to turn it over and get it off for half time, 14-0 at the break. Early into the second half then, Glasgow to get themselves into the 22, but Coombs and Klein managed to keep Darge up in the tackle, form a maul, and turn the ball over. Warriors then working their way back into the game. They get a penalty for Munster jumping across the line-out. They go to the corner once again, set up the driving maul, but Munster managed to hold them out. Decide then to spread it in field. We have some hard carries against tough defence. Both teams really standing up. Munster force a knock-on from Dempsey. Glasgow then win the penalty at the scrum, and it feels like it's a big, big chance for them now. They opt to scrum again. They win another penalty at the scrum. Munster get warned by the referee. They decide they're going to go for a penalty again, looking to maybe force a yellow card for Munster. But this time, the whole scrum crabs sideways. The ball spits out, and Casey managed to wrap up Horn as Horn kind of picked the ball. Byrne comes in to help him as well. It's another turnover scrum to Munster. Munster then win the penalty at that scrum. They kick it clear, but Glasgow then, they got a period where they've got possession, but they're kind of stuck around about halfway, can't really make progress. Munster's defence, it's standing, forcing errors and kind of stripping them of any momentum. But then Glasgow go up a notch and manage to get into the 22. Tuipulotu with some really good carries there. Munster lose Nash after a collision in one of those carries for him. Byrne then decides to go for an intercept as Glasgow are spreading out wide. Glasgow then exploit that and they get Stain over in the corner. The conversion is missed. We're at 14-5, and you can feel that Glasgow really still can win this now. You can see that they're starting to believe. Munster decide, they've got to come forward and try and get another score to seal their spot in the semi-final. Glasgow's defence, though, again, is solid, and they managed to force a knock-on from Josh Wycherley. Munster beginning to pin Glasgow in their own 22 now. We have a poor pass from Tuipulotu, and MacLeod takes the ball over his own line. It's another 5-metre scrum for Munster, and you feel like time's really running out for Glasgow now, and they really don't need to be camped on their own line here. Munster attack off the back of the scrum, but then play gets stopped because there's a head clash between Tuipulotu and Fekitoa. Tuipulotu gets a yellow card. Basically, it was an upright tackle, head-on-head contact, but referee said he was passive in the tackle, so he wasn't the one kind of delivering the force. So for him, that was enough mitigation to bring it down to a yellow. Munster lose Fekitoa as well. He can't continue, so Lockman has to come back on for him. Munster then, they're camped on the line. They're going for pick and goes, but there's some great defence from Glasgow with just 13 men. Lockman gets over the line, but he gets held up. Munster come again, but really can't get as close again. And our final score is 14-5. Munster go on to the semi-final. Now let's have a look at some of the stats from the game, starting with attack. So tries, 1 for Glasgow, 2 for Munster. Low scoring game. Felt like that, Glasgow, they had a lot of chances, couldn't convert them. Maybe, in this type of game, taking the 3s instead of going for the 5s and 7s might have been the smarter thing to do. Possession 53% to Glasgow, 47% to Munster. So you can see that Glasgow really were, holding onto the ball even with a man down for most of the game. Clean breaks then, 6 for Glasgow, 1 for Munster. Glasgow really were really good with ball in hand. They were able to, when they had 15 and when they went down to 14, really able to manipulate that Munster defence and create those gaps to get players through. You can see that as well reflected in the defenders beaten 33-7. Offloads then 8 for Glasgow, 2 for Munster. Some of the offloads though from Glasgow weren't very sympathetic to the player receiving the ball, ended up in some errors, or also ended up in the player just getting smashed in the tackle. Onto defence then, territory was 50-50. Both teams had periods where, they were getting themselves into the opposition 22, but, for both teams, defence really was very solid and helping them to kind of, keep the opposition out when it looked like they were certain to score. Number of tackles, 174 for Glasgow, 227 for Munster. So from both teams, really good defensive shifts. Missed tackles, just 7 for Glasgow. Shows what an excellent performance it was for them when Munster had the ball. 33 from Munster, but the scramble was really good. Like a lot of time when Glasgow were getting in behind them, they were able to scramble and prevent them from turning that into a score. Tackle success, an amazing 96% for Glasgow, 87% for Munster. Just to kind of put it into perspective, 87% is actually a decent defensive performance. We normally see in most of the EuroC games like 85 to 87 is kind of where you'd expect the tackle success to be at. So 96 is just kind of out of this world. Turnovers 7 for Glasgow, 10 for Munster. Both teams coming up with very big turnovers at key moments in the game, but it was Munster's turnovers that really did win it for them. Kicking then, kicks retained, 1 for Glasgow, 2 for Munster. Not that many kicks in the game. There were a couple of short kicking periods, but mostly the teams are trying to put the ball through the hands, both showing great intent in attack as well. Kicking success, I've said on every other review from this weekend that this stat in its current format should not be on the official EuroC website because it's obviously wrong, and what's the point of it? I don't know. Hopefully they're going to fix it for the semi-finals. Penalties then conceded, 8 for Glasgow, 12 for Munster. I think Munster may be a little bit lucky not to concede a yellow card for consistent penalties. Definitely could have been warned a little bit earlier about the amount of penalties they were giving away, and seen teams definitely get players sent to the bin for the number of penalties they were conceding close to their own line. In terms of then the teams overall, so Glasgow, I think they did well to stay in the game with 14, showed the spirit that really got them in fourth place, having been way outside of the playoff spots earlier on in the season. Put that great run together, and you've got to be a good team to be able to do that, and to get up so high to get that home quarterfinal as well. Probably should have taken the points early on, and maybe towards the end then it might have been a tighter game and they might have had that impetus to maybe go for the final score that would have won it for them. Really should have kept the scoreboard ticking over when they were in the ascendancy, but that's the kind of gamble you take, right? You think, okay, if we score a try here, that really sets us up, and then Munster have to chase the game, but just couldn't get it done when they wanted to. EuroC season is over for them now, and that's the first home defeat since January of 2022, but they still have the Challenge Cup final against Toulon to look forward to. Munster, they held on in defence when Glasgow were on top. Some great physicality, not just from them, from both teams. They took their chances well. They did struggle in the second half to kind of get that score that would kind of make the results secure for them, but they also denied Glasgow the momentum for that a second score would have given them in that second half. And this game really was a real contest. As I said, great intensity from both teams, put their bodies on the line. Munster, though, are going to be hoping that the players who had to go off for various reasons can come back for that semi-final against Leinster next weekend.